It's a pleasure and an honor to have you, Francis Haugen, on the W Radio Show. Thank you very much for attending this interview.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Francis, I saw you recently tweet, actually 1 hour ago or something like that. You said that we turn to social media for connection and understanding. But unfortunately, there are big threats online right now in the world, online world. Which is your biggest concern about these online threats?
Social media is the most powerful industry we've ever seen in history for the level of opacity, right? So they wield huge amounts of influence in our society, like what we get to see, what we don't get to see, and you get no transparency into them. The number one threat is the fact that these are unaccountable companies wielding just unfathomable amounts of power. We need to see how these systems work, because even the small glimmer we saw through my documents was that they give the most reach, the most extreme ideas, and even they know they're doing things like radicalizing our politics.
For the people that are listening to you right now, not only in the United States, but also around the world where we broadcast, tell us a little bit, like, what happened that all of a sudden you became the cover of Time magazine, and your name was everywhere.
Last fall, the Wall Street Journal began reporting on a series of documents that I disclosed to Congress and the SEC that were from Facebook's own research. That document after document, 20,000 pages of them, detailed that Facebook knew that it was causing political parties to run more extreme positions because the political parties were telling them that changes made inside of Facebook, changes made for their own economic gain, were changing our politics. And the world has changed a lot since then. They also found things like Facebook knew it was harming our kids and didn't do anything. Facebook has over and over again taken advantage of the fact that we can't confirm what's going on to mislead us or misdirect our attention so we don't force them to change.
From that day that you disclosed this information till today, have you seen any real changes so far? Can you tell us a little bit?
So a huge, very important law passed in Europe just maybe a month ago. So something called the Digital Services Act passed in the European Union. And for the first time in history, we have the ability to ask independent questions of Facebook and get independent answers. And that's a huge deal. It also requires Facebook to actually tell us what risks it knows about. That it's not okay for Facebook to know that it's endangering our kids and then not tell us. They have to disclose every 6 months the risks they know about and their plans for making them better. That's a huge step forward.
Francis, for you, which is the biggest threat for democracy in the online world today?
I think the number one threat is the fact that we think Facebook likes to tell us Facebook is just a mirror. So what you see on Facebook, that's just a reflection of what's out in the world. But that's not true. Facebook is an amplifier. Mark Zuckerberg in 2018 said that the way that Facebook picks what you see is this process called engagement-based ranking. That's if it gets a comment, if it gets a like, if it gets a reshare, that means it's better content. The only problem when we depend on an AI to focus our attention instead of relying on our friends, relying on our family to focus on our attention, is that the algorithm gives us the most extreme ideas. It doesn't show us a representative set, because a post about consensus building, a post about how complicated reality is, it doesn't get the comments, it doesn't get the likes. But a post that baits us, that tries to lure us into a fight, that fight in the comments is viewed by Facebook as high quality. And that's super dangerous.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read in Business Insider, or I don't know where recently, that you said that the only way that Meta, or former Facebook, now Meta, can be clean or doing better is if Mark Zuckerberg resigns. Is that correct? He should resign?
For a long time, I hesitated from specifically calling out Mark. But when he said, hey, yes, Francis raised attention about things like ethnic violence caused by Facebook or kids killing themselves because of Instagram. Yes, Francis raised a lot of substantial issues. We're going to work on those. No. Mark came out and said, let's go make video games. He shifted the whole company to be Meta. He focused everything on the metaverse. If they can spend $10 billion on video games, they can spend more money on safety, especially for people who speak Spanish, because right now the underinvestment in non-English languages is criminal. Mark has not demonstrated that he can acknowledge he has power, and thus he can't go and acknowledge he has responsibility. And someone like that cannot be in charge of the most important communication company in the world.
You just mentioned Meta, and I just saw recently also this crazy news about not only one woman, but several reports of women that have been raped in the Meta world. What's your thought about this, and which is the solution for this kind of Meta new challenges?
When Meta announced they were going to shift from Facebook to the metaverse, in the announcement video, Mark said over and over again, we're going to do safety by design this time. Safety by design. It was like 5 minutes of him just repeating the word safety over and over again. And yet, so they have a product called Horizons. So Horizons is Facebook's virtual world inside of Oculus, their VR headset. And they let some journalists in for the first time. So they were doing a little test launch, seeing how people like it, brought some journalists in. This was a couple months ago. Within a day, the first women reported, hey, these people are groping me.
Wow.
And one day. It took 1 day. So how many women do you think work on those teams that no one noticed or no one brought up women might get assaulted? And so there are things that Facebook can do. The vast majority of men do not sexually assault women, even in VR. But the few men that do will hop from game to game to game. We have to build in shared resources across the applications. So if someone is a violator, someone hurts women, they can't just shift over to the next game. And Facebook is intentionally trying to avoid responsibility. On Instagram, they are responsible for everything that happens there. But they want to shift that attention onto 10,000 games. So if something bad happens in that game, they can go, oh, I'm so sorry, that sounds really bad, but we didn't write that game. But the reality is they could be making shared libraries so that people could do translation really easily in each game. So you could do support, so you could track violators across games. They can make choices to design for safety, to do what they said they were going to do, but they need to do it publicly, and they need to do it now.
When I go to your Twitter account, it says Francis Haugen, advocate for accountability and transparency in social media, right? How transparent is social media today?
Social media as an industry is the most powerful industry for the least amount of transparency that we've ever seen. Like if we were dealing with cars, at every point in the evolution of the car industry, the public muscle of accountability could grow up right next to it, right? We could buy a car and we could take it apart. We could put a sensor on it and see the smoke. We could crash a car. We never get to stress test social media like that because they hide behind a curtain. The Digital Services Act in the European Union is the first time we have ever gotten to look behind the curtain. And so we are only on the very first edge of transparency. Like we need so much more because we have no clue what's going on behind the curtain.
Francis, last question, and I really appreciate your time. Which will be your best advice for everyone that is actually a user or a consumer on social media?
I'm a big proponent that the best way to navigate our new information environment is, one, subscribe to at least one publication that you really believe in, that you trust. Have at least one, contribute into the media ecosystem, and have a news source that you trust. But the second is make a group of friends. This could be a group chat. It could be a small group on a social platform. But people you know, maybe it's 10 people, maybe it's 20 people, and let that be your group to try to digest news and information together with. Because the reality is we are trying to be manipulated in all kinds of directions. But when we work together, when we process information together, we can stitch together something that's closer to the truth. And that's the best way forward.
Francis Haugen, advocate for accountability and transparency in social media. Thank you very much for being on W Radio.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much.